I am Karen Coleman. I am the Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Development at the New York State Department of Labor. And I wear another hat. I'm the Governor's Office Advisor for Workforce Policy and Innovation. It is such a great honor to speak with you all today. Like most of you in your workplaces, the New York State Department of Labor has faced many unprecedented challenges over the last several months. And I think it's appropriate that this event is centered around the theme of time to make your pivot. In many ways, that's what we've had to do in every aspect of our lives, from our homes to our workplaces or workspaces as a result of the pandemic. For many of us, we were literally rebuilding the plane as we were flying it. In a positive way, for the Department of Labor, these challenges have forced us to take a fresh look at how we serve New Yorkers. And as we pivot to help New Yorkers adapt to a new normal in the workforce, we are reevaluating how to better serve them. This means being creative and forward-thinking about how we provide services in a virtual world. From assisting job seekers remotely to helping businesses thrive in a virtual world, we are working to meet the needs of all. This is not going to happen overnight. Rebuilding our workforce, business, and economy will take time as we navigate these uncharted waters. But we are identifying ways to help women in the workforce and all New Yorkers who have been displaced from their jobs reassess their skills, abilities, and interests, and refocus their goals to point them on a path to success. Our Career Center teams remain committed to connecting all New Yorkers with a job and a career they love, and we are finding resourceful ways to help them get back to work. As working women, we've all faced struggles and challenges, but it's our tenacity and strength that have helped us tackle the barriers that stood in our way. As we maneuver through the detours and the unknowns that the public health crisis has strewn across our path, I encourage you to find inspiration of the women who came before us. This year, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. Despite the obstacles and the struggles, these heroines came together for a common cause. These women fought for decades so that we could have the privilege to exercise the extraordinary right to vote. Sadly, many of them were not alive to see the fruits of their own labor, but that didn't stop them from blazing a trail for the rest of us. And we need to continue to model that perseverance in the face of adversity. While women have made tremendous progress since that milestone in history, there is still more progress to be made. Fortunately, we have a governor who has been a champion for women's issues and has fought alongside us for women's equality. From tackling sexual harassment in the workplace to closing the gender wage gap, Governor Andrew Cuomo has been a progressive leader. But today is about empowering you and the women around you, leaders in our community, our businesses, and in our state. As you talk about telling your story and developing your brand as part of the program, remember that you are your best spokesperson. We have a responsibility to each other as women to encourage one another in our individual journeys and build each other up in our aspirations. Don't let the challenges from this pandemic sidetrack you from your personal goals. Instead, embrace them as part of your journey. The women who fought for the passage of the 19th Amendment changed history by blazing a trail of change and opportunity. I hope that together we can all play a role in the next chapter of making a better and brighter future for all women. But what will be your story? To help you answer that question, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first presenter for this afternoon. Kate Kat Koppett is co-director of Mopco Improv Theater and founder and CEO of Koppett, an organizational development consultancy that is a leader in applied improv. She holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drama from New York University and a Master's of Art in Organizational Psychology from Columbia University. In addition to authoring the book, Training to Imagine, Practical Improvisation Theater Techniques to Enhance Creativity, Teamwork, Leadership, and Learning, Kat is also a coach, entrepreneur, thought leader, and artist. She will be assisted today by Jelani Commander. Thank you so much and enjoy today's program.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here with you and to have Jelani joining me. What a wonderful way to start today. And, you know, I guess I just want to frame up our conversation a little bit to talk about story and what do we even mean by story. The very first presentation I ever gave on storytelling was at a conference in 1999. I had no business being allowed to be a presenter at that time, but some generous people invited me to come and talk about improvisational storytelling. And I was about 45 minutes of the way through the presentation, and someone who later became a very dear friend of mine raised his hand in the back and he said, "Excuse me, can you define your terms? What do you mean by storytelling?" And I was like, I don't know. And I facilitated a conversation about what we meant by story. And since then, I realized the importance of defining our terms. To me, to us at Koppett, story is meaning. And I didn't make that up myself. We borrow that phrase from the cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner. But it feels especially important to say it today, here in this moment in history, which is one of the deep, important things to have to be resilient, to surf chaos and transition, is a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning. And the way our brains make up meaning, the way we make sense of the world, is to create stories. Storytelling is the way our brains make meaning. So as we engage in this process of creating our story, of thinking about telling our story, what we're really doing, not just for other people, but for ourselves, is saying, how do I make meaning for myself? How do I create my own purpose and be clear for myself about what are my values, what's my intention, and what do I want my North Star to be? So this exercise should not just be about for other people, but for yourself. The other thing that means for us in terms of how we look at story and how we coach story and when we bring story to individuals or groups is that we don't think this is an external skill that some people have and some people don't, or that we are teaching to people. What we believe is that human beings are innately storytellers, and that the work that we're doing is helping us get more conscious and deliberate about this activity that we're doing habitually and unconsciously all the time. So the work that we're doing is about tapping into that, becoming more, as I say, conscious about it, and then aligning, becoming better and more skilled at aligning the story that we have in our head and that we want to be articulating with a story that our listeners are receiving and hearing and then making up in their head, so that we can be better at connecting and having the impact and the influence that we want to have. So those are the goals we have in terms of storytelling. We don't have very much time today, so what I hope we'll be able to do in this time is give you some skills, some tools that you can use to go through that process. And Jelani and I have already had a little bit of a chance to meet, and she's going to help me show you what that process might look like. So I will share them with you. Don't feel like you have to take a lot of notes, because we will give this to you on a takeaway card for you to have as your very own moving forward. We start by preparing to know what our key message is and know what the meaning is. with 6 questions. And here they are. And then Jelani and I will walk through them as an example for you. The first is, what is my key message? We start with the end in mind. What is the moral of my story? What is my main key point that I want people to take away? In this case, if we're talking about our story, our brand story, what is it that I want them to know most about me? So Jelani, in your case, what is the moral of your story or your key message?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jelani Commander. I'm currently a part of the Bold Women's Leadership Network. I'm class of 2022. I'm here on the behalf of Yolanda. Thank you, Yolanda, for this opportunity once again. My main message that I stand for is to never stop dreaming. And I think that holds like a lot of weight, not only with me, but like a lot of other individuals as well, not only the youth, but even like when you get later in adulthood. Often I think some people think it's too late to achieve your dreams, but in reality, it's never too late because the sky's the limit. So just keep on chasing your dreams because you never know what can happen.
Beautiful. So, so there's, your key message is never stop dreaming. I'm going to reduce it to. Now, I heard you, Jelani, when you were talking about that, name a lot of different people or different kinds of audiences that this message could apply to. And that's wonderful. For our sake today, I'm going to ask you to pick one of those. And that's the second question. So who is your audience that you want to work on crafting this story for today?
I said that my audience is other youth, like the youth in general.
Great.
So.
And what's important about this question, everyone, is that the same story, the same message for a different audience becomes a different story. For example, we work a lot with Paralympic athletes. So we went to the USOC and worked with their Paralympic athletes who are, if you don't know, these are the elite Olympic level athletes who have physical disabilities. And we were working with their ambassadors who travel around and speak to the media, speak to other athletes with disabilities or war veterans who've just been injured, or families of some of military families who may have just had a loved one come back who are injured. These are very, very different audiences. And so whatever their message is, sometimes the message is exactly the same, sometimes the message is different, but those audiences are very different and need very different messages. So the moral of your story is never stop dreaming. Your audience that you're targeting your story to right now is youth. So your peers, in essence. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. What do you want your peers to do differently once they've heard your message?
Something I would want my peers to do differently is to block out all the outside noise and just tune in with yourself, like understand yourself and really get in touch with what your purpose is. Because often, like sometimes the outside noise can like interfere with like some of your goals, and like some of that outside noise could like simply just be your environment that you're in and the people you're around. So I would say just stay true to yourself and like block out all the outside noise.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Lovely. And the next question is, what's in it for them? This is a very important question. I think you can probably get it, but we often skip it, right? I know it's important. I know why it's important to me. That may or may not be the same thing that's important to my audience, right? So for example, with our Paralympic athletes, if my key message is, I want to save it because I'm going to tell you a story in a minute, but so let me use another example. If my key message is leave them alone, right? My key message is let people do it in their own time. My key message is the family of Paralympic athletes. That's what I want them to do differently. The key message is everybody does it on their own pace. What I want them to do differently is leave the athlete alone. What's in it for them? What I know what's in it for me as the athlete is don't bug me. What's in it for the family might be the person's actually going to heal faster. What I want is for them to heal faster, for example. All right. So what's in it for them, Jelani?
I think what's in it for them is more so like that learning experience. Like you get to learn, acquire so much knowledge from like your whole process, like even just about like life now, but life in the future as well. So as you're going on throughout life, every step of the way is like a learning experience. So it's more so you're learning something new about yourself each day.
Beautiful. That's great. So it's a learning experience. If you stay focused on your thing, you won't be distracted, and you'll have all these opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. Great. What obstacles or challenges are there for your peers in focusing on themselves and blocking out the noise?
Some obstacles could be insecurity, you know. Often a lot of people, they don't really continue to chase their dreams or even bother because it's the idea of, oh, I can't do this, or they see somebody like higher up doing it, so they feel like this idea of self-doubt that holds a lot of people back, you know, not only physically wise but mentally wise as well. And if you're facing that level of insecurity internally, you're not going to be able to evolve as a person in anything you do.
Great. And then and I also just want to mention in this question, sometimes we also skip this. We say, this is such a great message. I know what I want them to do, and I'm willing to say, here's what's in it for you, but I don't always think about what makes it hard for you. What makes it hard for the families of the Paralympic athletes to leave them alone is I want to encourage them. I want to show them I'm there for them. I know I have a better way to do it. It's so hard to see them sitting there depressed, things like that. So therefore, what do they need to know, feel, and be able to do? And it's really only at this point that we start to think about, what am I going to put in my story? Like, it's at this point that we start to say, here's the content of my story. Look how much time and thought we've put in before we ever start building what I'm actually going to say in my story. So Jelani, what are some of the things that you know you're going to want to share in your story to help address or get to your message? You can just dump it out on the table, right?
I'm gonna say confidence. That's a really big one for you to be able to, like, before you can even do anything, you have to have that level of confidence and dedication as well, because nothing in life really comes easy. Like, you have to be willing to put those hours in, put that time aside, ignore everything else, and like really focus on yourself and like understand yourself and your purpose.
Right. And what I know from talking to you before is that you have examples of how you've done it and how it's paid off. You have, the specifics of hardship that you've gone through and come out the other side. So you have a lot of evidence that you're going to be able to share about how, to prove your point, that you can have dreams, that it can pay off, that you can get through these obstacles because you're the model of it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we start by these questions. We start by thinking out, what is it I really believe in, that I really want to say and share? Who do I want to share it with? What do I want them to do? And not what do I want them to think and feel, but what do I want them to do? And in this kind of situation, in a networking situation or a selling situation, do I want them to sign a contract? Do I want them to give me their card? Do I want them to go check out my website? Do I want them to cry? Do I want them to donate money to my institution? What is it I actually want them to do? Do I want them to take action, to read more? Do I want them to go protest? What is it I want my audience to do? And really putting into behavioral action will help you clarify, what do I then need to put into my story that will make them feel and think and be able to do toward that action. All right, now it's time to craft our story. And this is the actual storytelling part. The storytelling spine is by far our most popular tool or mechanism for storytelling. And we learned it from a colleague of ours, an improviser and playwright named Ken Adams. His motivation at the time that he created it was to help us improvise full-length plays on stage, 2-act plays, one set, each improviser just playing one character in real time, like an Ibsen play or a Chekhov play. And so we really had to understand narrative structure to be able to co-create this. We then went off and did some organizational development work with lots of organizations, including an organization called Pixar. They later published their 30 storytelling tips, and the Story Spine was among them. So you may have seen this called the Pixar Story Spine, but it was actually created by this improviser and playwright, Ken Adams. And what he was doing with these prompts was distilling the sort of Aristotelian ideal of a well-made story into these steps. Now, the idea is not that you really start your story with the words "once upon a time" in real life, but what it helps you do is create the structure of your story, create the meaning, the essential core meaning or spine of your story. And then you can play with it. You can tell it in different orders. You can add detail. You can tell the 30-second version or the hour-long version, but you're very clear about what the structure is. And it seems that virtually every story, at least in Western cultures, to feel complete and satisfying has this structure at its heart. So I'll give you a quick example, and then Jelani will go through our story. So the platform is once upon a time and every day. So one of our Paralympic athletes ended up telling this story. Once upon a time, I was in a terrible accident doing some backwoods skiing, and I broke my spine. And every day for months and months and months, I sat in a hospital moping and being depressed because I'd been this great athlete, and I was sure that I would never be able to ever be an athlete again. And I would, so that's what he said. But one day, my wife got me off the couch, and she pulled in a stationary bike and set it up for me. This is the catalyst, the but one day, something changes, to tell us a new part of the story. And she set it down next to me, and she said, "Get on." So that changes the story. I've been sitting around moping. She said, "Get on the bike." Consequences. Because of that, I started pedaling. And we can have as many consequences as we like. Because of that, I was completely exhausted and I almost fell off the bike. Next consequence. Because of that, she carried me back to the couch. Until finally I said, "Why don't you just leave me alone?" I used to be able to bicycle, 5 days in a row, 200 miles a day, and now I can barely do 2 minutes. And she said to me, this is the climax. So when the two parts come to a head, the climax is where we're going to decide that is the story going to end this way or this way. She said, "Yeah, how many minutes did you do yesterday?" And ever since then is the new routine, the new resolution. I said, "Oh." And ever since then, I've remembered to celebrate the 2 minutes. So the moral of his story was celebrate the 2 minutes, just do a little bit every day, and you'll get back to shape. Okay, so that's the story. Let's hear your story, Jelani. So the platform of your story is, let's hear it.
So once upon a time, there was a young girl who was very lost, and she had no sense of purpose, let alone any career aspirations for the future. Like, she was completely lost. But one day that all changed with her trip to Walmart. That trip consisted of her going to the arts and crafts section, picking up a tie-dye kit and one blank t-shirt. After that trip, she went back to her grandmother's house and she explored that kit the whole night. It was a school day, but she didn't care much. She just really wanted to try that craft. So she opened the tie-dye kit. And from that point on, it was just a big glob of mess. Like, colors went everywhere. And at the end of that, because of that experience, there was this spark that ignited within her. And right then and there, she knew her purpose. she wasn't completely sure, but she had an idea of what it was. And from that point on, she learned that she not only liked art, but she liked fashion too. So she thought to herself, why not combine the two and make fashion and new art? Until finally, she realized that she got really good at it. And from that point on, she realized to never stop dreaming, and like the sky is the limit.
Yay. How was that for you, Jelani? What did you discover using that tool?
I discovered that I was able to like get my story out in a nutshell, was much more concise, you know?
Yeah. Great. I want to pause for a second before I give you the last tool and last bit and see if we have any questions or comments from our audience, because I loved hearing your story and we've given them a lot of stuff so far. So before we go on any further, just what comments or questions do we have?
Do you find, Kat and or Jelani, that with those, with the story spine, that basically is unlocking things that maybe you weren't even aware of, or does it, like, to what extent did that help you in the move forward?
I think that really helped me. Like, I've always like told my story in a way that was like a lot of extra information, but like I feel like by using the spine, it was much more concise, and I learned a lot about myself that I just didn't really think about. You know, I didn't really think that much in depth about. So it really helped me not only like concise my story, but I learned a lot about myself that I had to stop back and really sit like, that really happened. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat too. So Marilyn's asking, would it be helpful when interviewing for a position? I think what Jelani is saying about this tool is the best thing about it, right? It helps you really get clarity about what is essential about your story and how do I drive what I'm talking about toward my message. So it's a great place to start. What's great about it, preparing for an interview, or even once you get used to it, thinking about answering with it in mind toward an interview, is you can really distill, as Jelani did, a story to its essence and answer succinctly and with focus. So if you know you have an interview where they're going to ask you about, you know, those behavioral interview questions where they say, can you tell me about a time when? You can have, you know, those right at your fingertips and say, what is the essence that I want to get to? A time when I made a mistake and learned from it. A time when I felt most proud of an accomplishment. And then just get very focused on what it is. And the spine will help you say, am I really kind of proving my point? Do I need to include that? And we'll get to the next part, which is about adding detail and color to your story, which can make it juicy. Elizabeth's asking, you're curious about whether it has to be a personal story. It doesn't have to be a personal story. The story spine is sort of a universal tool, and we can talk a little bit about types of stories. Let me see if I can share with you. There's a lot of content here, but I'll just preview a little bit of content here under my extra slides section. So there are many different things to think about when you're thinking about types of story to tell. Today, we're talking about personal story and your brand story. Even just in that context, there are some choices to make. We just heard a past positive story from Jelani, right? So she says, I want to inspire my peers to keep dreaming. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to tell a positive story from my past to prove to them that it's possible. We can also tell a positive story of the future, right? We heard one to start off the meeting, right? Like, this is what we would like to see for the future. Let's all help each other in the future. And this is the beautiful future that we would like to see. If we all come together, this is what it will be like. When we go to driver's ed, we hear cautionary tales about the terrible things that happen if we text and drive, right? Sometimes they show us scared straight videos that are past negative stories, right? Or we can have future negative stories that are like, if you don't vote, here's what's in store, for example. So those are some of the choices you can make. All of those can be personal stories, but we also have other choices. We can tell someone else's story. I told you a story as an example of Scott, the Paralympic cyclist that I was working with, because I love his story and he gave me permission. I could also tell you a fictional story, right? Because sometimes there's an advantage in telling a fable because it's very simple and memorable and evocative as a metaphor. We can tell, right? There's lots of choices to make in terms of the stories you have. And this story spine structure works with all of them. Let's talk a little bit about the detail that we're adding. So Jelani had a couple of little, in addition to the spine, she had a couple of little details, like the tie-dye colors were everywhere, right? She walked into a Walmart. If she were going to tell us the 45-minute version of her story that I got to hear the other day, I know that there's even more juicy detail, right? If she were going to have this conversation with a peer, this would be a great place to start. But then my guess is your friends would say, yeah, but Jelani, it's not that easy. You make it sound so easy, but what really happened? Or how did you really do that? Or how did you get from your grandmother, from that first kit to having this, beautiful artwork and t-shirts and, for real, how did you really make it a business? And there would be a lot more detail that we would have to add. So we call that the color of the story. It's why I could do a story spine of Romeo and Juliet and it would work in this structure, but it wouldn't last 500 years and you wouldn't pay $100 to see, the play version of my story spine. So let's model this, and then you can do this for yourself, or you can have a friend do it with you with your story. And when you go back to your 6 questions and you think about who's your audience, what they need to know, do, and feel, how much time you have, what your goal is, you'll be able to decide where you want to add description. Some of that you'll decide ahead of time, some of you'll decide in the moment. So let's just show you what I mean. So Jelani, you're gonna start your story again at the top. And every now and then I'm just gonna say, color something that you say. I'll say color the blank and you'll add detail. Or I'll say advance. And when I say advance, you'll just go to the next part of your story and keep moving forward with the story until I say color again. So start at the top.
Once upon a time, there was once a young girl, and she was lost, and she didn't know her sense of purpose.
Color not knowing your sense of purpose for me.
She will always, every time everybody would ask her, what do you want to do in the future? She would always say, I don't know. That almost grew to become her favorite response at a very young age, which is not very good because every other kid her age knew what they wanted to do, or at least had an idea of what they wanted to do.
Good, advance.
But one day, that all changed when she went to Walmart and went to the arts and crafts section. She was so happy that day. Nobody could tell her anything. She picked up the tie-dye kit and had about 20 colors in it.
Color the tie-dye kit even more.
It came in like a big bucket, like basic colors, orange, yellow, and on that aisle was a bunch of t-shirts. So she didn't want to start off with anything too big. Because of that experience, she went home that day and really explored the tie-dye kit. She didn't know what she was doing. She watched one YouTube tutorial, but that didn't really work for her. She wanted to just explore on her own and make her own rules about how to do it. So
explore making your own rules, color making your own rules.
By making her own rules, she made what was to be a mess, which wasn't really a mess, but more so a learning experience. She thought if she watched a YouTube tutorial, she'd be taking somebody else's process instead of creating her own. And art is really about you learning about yourself and making your own process. So she wanted to create her own style, even though that style meant getting tie-dye on her grandmother's floor all over the place.
Great. I'm going to stop you there just for time. But so that's how it works. I'll leave you with this. there is no one right story. The right story is the right story for the moment and the person that you're connecting with. And when you can be really present, when you can be open to co-creating the narrative and being clear about your message and connected to the person that you're with, that is usually when the story is most memorable, most resonant, and most satisfying to both places. So we offer you these tools and the willingness to play with them and to have your story be a living, breathing, evolving thing. We have, in my last minute, I'll tell you 2 quick things from clients that I've learned. One is that we have a client right now who a global consulting company, and they're very clear that what they're helping their clients do is not rebuild, but reinvent. Because where we're going is a different place than where we've been, and where we were wasn't working all that well, really. So our resilience is about transformative resilience, not about trying to recapture. And it's one of the reasons why I chose to share our story of the Paralympic athletes. I think they have a lot to teach us about not trying to recapture, reclaim what was, but learning and developing and growing into something new. So looking for new stories. And the second is, I was just working with some engineers at a social media company that you may know. And I had a sponsor there, a manager who loves storytelling and had sponsored this big program for storytelling. But he had a manager in the program who we asked them to do stories, and he shared a story, and I saw my sponsor getting very, very uncomfortable at the back of the room and going like, no, he's doing it wrong, he's doing it wrong. But it's the one story that I remember from the whole day. And he had an epiphany and transformative moment of really any story is okay. And this was the story that the manager told that that has been very useful for me in this time and day and time, which was, the story was this. There was a farmer who went out to till his field like he did every day. But as he was walking out to the field, he saw a rabbit run past him and bang into a tree and die at his feet. And because of that, he had a beautiful, delicious rabbit stew for dinner. So the next day, instead of going out to till his field, he sat by the tree and waited for a rabbit to run into it. And no rabbit came, but he did it the next day and the next day and the next day. And he did it all season long until all his crops had gone fallow and nothing grew in the field. And winter came and he had no crops and he starved to death because he had no rabbits and he had no crops. And the manager said, and the moral of the story is, don't sit around waiting for rabbits to run into trees. You have to go out and plant your field and water it and sow it and harvest it. And if rabbits run into trees, that's always a nice treat, but you can't sit around waiting for them. So I don't know exactly what the connection is to this moment in time. We'll do it for ourselves, but just day by day, I wish you all health and stamina, and it's lovely to connect.